Okay, we're live. Be careful with what you say.
All right. I just think it's an interesting question, and yeah, I don't know. It's something we can discuss at some point, and if folks are, tell me when people start coming in. But yeah, it's something we can discuss. It's definitely a different dynamic, I think, to just to having walked around there and been there than having not. There's some sort of link there. I don't know if it's as strong as I think it is, but it's pretty clear that, like you said, Vip, to some, it is extremely strong.
Yeah. I also didn't grow up like with college sports really. Like I had my favorite teams, but like people up north, they don't really live and die with college sports.
Yeah, because you had
all the pro sports.
Where did you grow up?
Right outside New York City, Rockland County.
See, I grew up here, so all we had was college sports.
Yeah. Like I had my favorite teams, and then I started rooting for North Carolina, the Sean May year.
So you said, where'd you say where's Far Rockaway?
Oh my gosh, we already have 75 people in here.
Rockland County. It's probably like 30 minutes upstate from the city. No traffic.
Hello, boss.
What's up, Greg?
Hey, guys.
I knew somebody from Far Rockaway, which is down there on like one of the islands.
Yeah, probably like Long Island. RJ Davis is from Westchester County, which is right across the bridge from Rockland County.
So where is the line, and we'll get started when everybody gets in here. Where is the line, Vip, from New York City to New York State? Is it right when you cross the bridge?
I would yeah. Once you get like out of the city, like it's not really considered New York. Like people consider where I'm from upstate New York, and if you like look at the map, it's as close to New York City as you could get.
Someone said they've been skipping work and following the Hubert Davis news all day.
Probably not the only one.
And someone just called Greg Barnes, aka Greg Schefter.
Schefter. That's funny.
Greg Barnes with the first question of the Hubert Davis coaching career.
And he's interrupted.
He didn't even answer the question.
I think
I thought that was usually reserved for me.
Joey Powell.
One opportunity to say, you know what? We are mixing things up. We're going to make all the fans happy.
Bring a
you did tee it up for him. You had him
director of analytics.
Got him fired up. Answered my question about fire early. Let's get it started. We got some people here ready to listen live. Appreciate folks joining us. Let's get it rolling. Welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. You are listening live if you're on the YouTube stream, the Inside Carolina YouTube stream at the moment. Tuesday evening, 9 o'clock on the East Coast. Got a fun show planned. Greg Barnes is here, Joey Powell, Taylor VIppolis, Gregory Hall, manning the live stream. We will have other guests join us as the night goes on. I guess we'll talk about the new head basketball coach at the University of North Carolina. Hubert Davis announced yesterday, full press conference today at 2 o'clock. Greg, I'll get right into it. Something that I kind of took away from yesterday and today and watching as much as I could. Hubert Davis said, "You'll never know unless you give me a shot." He told that to Dean and Roy years ago. He basically said it again today. Your general thoughts on this? This feels like a big deal for North Carolina.
Well, for sure it is. And look, Hubert Davis, his job today was to calm the masses, to settle any fears that he was not ready for this job, to share a little bit about himself, to share the lineage, right? The fact that he played for Dean, the fact that Dean, Bill Guthridge, and Roy Williams came to his house when he was in high school to recruit him. He coached under Roy. He is the embodiment of what Carolina basketball is, right? What does he lack? He lacks head coaching experience. But his job was to share all those things and be reassuring and provide some energy and provide some passion. And he did all those things. You know, as Inside Carolina, we try to kind of dive deeper, and so we ask questions about recruiting and about style of play. And he really didn't have much answers for those, right? Kind of spoken generalities, which is okay. I mean, there's plenty of time to get into those specifics. But that's why we asked. But today was more about kind of just presenting himself to the Carolina family, to the Carolina fan base, most importantly, and to the country of like, hey, you know, this was not a bad hire. This was a hire that I'm going to prove to you is a good hire. He clearly has a lot of support, has some very powerful people behind him. I think it speaks volumes how much he heaped praise on Roy Williams, because Roy Williams was really in his corner on this. And so, you know, I think he did what he needed to do. And yes, it's a momentous occasion. I mean, the fact that North Carolina has its first black men's basketball coach has been a long time coming. That's a great thing for the program. That's a great thing for college basketball. And so a lot of good things occurred today. And crazy that we were talking 4 days ago about Roy Williams retiring, and now this new modern era has begun.
Indeed, it has. And before I forget, rate us, review us, subscribe, and do that on the podcast links and in the podcast apps, and also subscribe on this YouTube channel. You might get to see us again tomorrow night talking about a different topic. And of course, support Johnny T-shirt. And I say it all the time. If you're not a premium subscriber to Inside Carolina, you have missed out a ton, even in the last 4 days. So get on that bandwagon and join up. Greg Barnes had the first question to Hubert Davis. Started off with a bang. You know, my concern with Hubert, and I voiced it all week, was that I didn't know if he was mean enough to be a head coach. And Greg, he chopped you off at the knees right away.
Yeah, and I had a smart aleck response in my mind, but that would not have been a very intelligent move on my behalf to start the Hubert Davis era. But look, it's going to be a question he's going to hear a ton. He is going to hear that a ton. You know, 4 days ago, Roy Williams is talking about how he's lost connection with the players. And all season long, we've talked about how North Carolina is not valuing the three-point line, whether it be offensively or defensively. And that, you know, is this too traditional big approach archaic? We've had those discussions. You know, you guys know my stance on that. I mean, I think a lot of that was overblown. But those are the types of conversations that he's going to have. Those are the types of questions he's going to have to answer. And if he doesn't do it in a press conference, which is fine, he's going to have to do it on the court. And so those are the things that are coming. And, you know, as I said, we asked those questions. We asked about recruiting, which he kind of just reiterated what Roy says on the recruiting trail. Those are perfectly fine. Today was more about him kind of showcasing himself. But those questions are not going away, Tommy.
Indeed, they won't, not until they lace them up, I guess, October. So we've got a big show. I've got Taylor Vip, as I said, Joey Powell here. Shout out to Joey Powell for getting a second dose of the vaccine today. Joey, I can tell you that if it's bothering you now, you're in for a couple tough days.
Yesterday, and I thought I got through my 24-hour window. My wife made a joke about it earlier today. We're actually at the beach and went out, did some fishing today, and now I'm back in. And about an hour ago, I started feeling like garbage. But I just rewatched Hubert's press conference again, and now I feel great. So I'm good.
Absolutely. I've also got Michael Brooker has joined us. I don't know the organization of our pictures, our faces on your screen, but Brooks bottom right on mine. Mike, you've been pretty vocal about what you think about Hubert Davis. From a Carolina family guy, what's his hire mean to you?
I think it's incredible, man. He is Carolina through and through. I've gotten to know Hubert really, really well over the years. Worked his Christian basketball camp for about 12 summers. Spent a couple of nights at his weekends at his house on trips up to Chapel Hill. Got a chance to really get to know Leslie really well, and you're not going to find, aside from Coach Williams, probably anybody that loves University of North Carolina more than Hubert Davis does. And You can tell the passion he has for this place, the passion he has for the university, the basketball program, the reverence he speaks of for Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge and Coach Williams. So I know he's going to pour everything he has into this place, and going to do so and be extremely passionate about it. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I think obviously with his NBA background, his college background, his assistant background, I think he's as I heard before from Jay Billis, the right man at the right time for this program, and I'm just really excited for him and his family, and for us as a program to kind of move forward with him at the helm.
Vip, I'm gonna come to you because I want to ask you a question since you're the most hip of the bunch here. I think you are at least. And if you're listening on the live stream, ask us some questions. At Wise Origin, can Hubert emulate Mac and make Carolina a cool place to go? Mac has definitely made the football program the cool place. So tell us, Vip, from your cool standpoint, what does a coach have to do to accomplish that?
I think you really just have to be personable. Somebody that when they come in for lunch, you want to sit down and talk with them. It could be anything from, music, current events that are going on, just somebody who you feel like you can have a conversation with. And I think the first sign of that you get with Hubert Davis is just like Mac Brown, he's going to win the press conferences. If you could win a press conference, there would be a banner hanging right now in the Smith Center with the clinic that Hubert Davis kind of put on. And you get that experience when you are an ESPN analyst and you are in front of the camera. And he's such a good public speaker. And I think the biggest sign that he is a really good public speaker is he could tell the same story over and over again, and you get the same cadence and the same delivery to the point where you're like trying to look past him to see if he's going off like a teleprompter when he's talking about his love for Chapel Hill, being doubted when he was coming to UNC. Those stories, I listened to the Carolina Insider interview he did. I watched the College Game Day, and then obviously the press conference, and it's the same stories every time, and it's just the same authentic Hubert Davis every time. And I think that's also the biggest thing. He's just an authentic person that you want to be around. You've seen all the reactions from his former teammates, former players in the Carolina program, current players in the Carolina program. Everybody loves Hubert Davis, and the reason is he's authentic, he's genuine, and he's somebody that you want to be close with.
Joey, we talked about it a lot on Inside Carolina Live. We'll have some special guests on Saturday at 10 o'clock on chapelboro.com and CHL and 97.9 The Hill. But we talked about this, and we talked about outsiders versus insiders. And I keep coming back. First of all, I said I would be absolutely shocked if it was somebody outside the family. And I think that a lot of people, for whatever reason, thought Carolina needed to move in an outside the family way to stay hip and to stay, with the current events, for lack of a better way of putting it, Joey.
Yeah.
I mean, you listened to it and you saw it, and we've talked about it so much. I think potentially they've nailed it.
So I'll be honest, I was not on board with this when it first started trending the way that it was going to be Hubert Davis. And I go back to something that Sherrell said, and I hate that he's not here, but I'm going to try to do him justice with this quote. The best coach may not be the right hire for North Carolina. And yeah, we've talked about how choosy Sherrell is with his words, but that kind of got me thinking about it. And then, from all of the former players that I have talked to, the ones that I've heard from on like interviews and podcasts, I mean, Brooke summed it up beautifully earlier. Like, it's all of those guys can't be wrong. Like, I just don't think that much basketball knowledge can be way off base. And, I actually had some reservations like, was he too nice? And I think obviously people know that that might be a criticism of Hubert Davis, because they've actually started addressing that too. You've heard him say, you're never going to see anybody that competes as hard as he does. The word overachiever has been used quite a bit. Um, I'm with you, man. After hearing the press conference today, and you guys are exactly right. You can tell he's very polished, very versed, but none of it feels fake. it all feels 100% genuine. And that's the type of stuff that I think is going to win in some living rooms. You know, when you're talking to moms about mac and cheese and nanner pudding and all that stuff, like I think that's what's going to actually carry over is that he's done the college thing where he overachieved. He's been very much a child of a single parent after he talked about losing his mom to cancer. Has been an absolute rock star throughout his NBA career and now as a coach. Can you really stand in front of him and say, "Well, you won't be a good coach at North Carolina"? Because his track record up until now tells you that you're probably going to be wrong.
Vip, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Joe, you mentioned how everybody's kind of been saying Hubert Davis is a really nice guy. Everybody's kind of mentioned that. I've talked with former players, and they're saying that like once he gets on the court, there's a switch that he hits where it's
New
not
ball
like
game.
he's not a mean person, but he can get in this mode where you kind of snap out of it and you're like, okay, like it's time to work. So I think that's also a big takeaway that I've gotten from a lot of the guys. Like Hubert comes across as this really nice and genuine person because he is, but don't let that fool you with he doesn't want to be out there and win. And I think the overall message I've gotten from guys that have played with Hubert and know Hubert,
Yeah.
it's that this team is going to compete and they're going to compete hard.
You know, I love that you said that. Tommy, I'll give this back to you in a second. But I saw something earlier. I can't remember who said it, but it was actually spot on. His aura in a press conference, he almost gets defensive. And I think about the way he responded to Greg. He didn't like bite Greg's hand off in that first question, but he has a little bit of that nasty, what feels like an edge behind it that MJ had. Like, you know, that where Jordan used to be in press conferences, like, who the hell are you to be asking me this question? I'm not saying he's MJ, but I do think you make a great point, Vip.
When did it become a bad thing to be a nice guy? I mean, the guy
I've
played
never been
12
one, I couldn't tell you.
years.
I think you get associated with a pushover, and I don't think he's gonna get pushed over.
Yeah, I don't think so either. You don't play in the NBA for 12 years. You don't play alongside of Michael Jordan. You don't play with John Starks and Charles Mason and those guys.
Patrick Ewing.
I mean, yeah.
Oak.
He is an incredibly nice guy.
Oak is one of the biggest jerks in the history of the league, and he played with Oak.
Right. Yeah, maybe it's the Christianity. He wears it on his sleeve. Maybe it's, I mean, a lot of these kids look up to him as a role model. He is, I don't know if reserved is the right word, maybe on the sidelines. But I guess all those things go into it. People just assume that he doesn't have the fire. But you can be nice and have plenty of fire. There's a lot of people who've had a lot of success doing that.
And I think we saw some of that switch, Joey, that you were talking about in the press conference today. When he was talking, I think it was the show up line, when he was talking about his dad and how his dad showed up, he was kind of holding back tears about how much he cared about his dad and how grateful he was to have him in his life. And then he transitioned from being emotional and having his heart on his sleeve, talking about his family, to the program, and then started forcefully, like aggressively talking to the mic of, don't get me wrong, we're going to show up. And he went on that rant, and the ACC network tweeted out about like ready to run through a brick wall type of thing. So like I think we kind of see the ability for him to switch very fast. Obviously a game setting is completely different than just sitting there telling stories and talking, but I think that is an example of kind of that switch that you're talking about, Joey.
He certainly answered a lot of the questions that I had, and maybe some of the worries. Let me ask you, Brooke, about this. And I know it's different these days. And he talked about this a little bit in the presser. Some kids want to go to college, and some kids just want to stop by and shoot a ball a little bit and then go to the next step. How important is it to have a coach that understands what it means to be a part of a college community, but also know what it takes and know what it's like to live, like Greg said, for 12 years in the NBA on some of the nastiest teams and toughest teams out there? I mean, I don't know if there's any other coach that was in this list, that could answer those questions and that could speak from the heart and speak from experience doing that.
He's the full package in regards to what it means to be fully invested at the college level and really love everything about your experience at the college level, playing for North Carolina. So he knows it from that perspective. But as you said, I mean, playing on the teams he played on for 12 years in the NBA, being able to kind of relate to the kids in that manner. Obviously, we got to have guys that can play at a high level. We got to have, as he said earlier in the press conference, some dudes. We got to get a few more dudes. We have not quite as many as we've been accustomed to the last couple of years, and so we need to get guys that obviously have the ability to be on campus for small amounts, for short amount of time. But we also need those Joel Berries, those Marcus Pages, those guys that are going to fully invest and just love on Carolina as much as they can and pour their heart and soul into the program. So we need obviously a healthy mix. I think he realizes that. And as Joey said, I mean, having Hubert walk in this living room and having a mom and a dad look into his eyes and listen to him talk about, I feel like they'll be 1,000% confident that their child is going to be taken care of and loved and treated with the utmost respect and encouraged to be the best absolute version of themselves they can be. So I feel 100% confident where we are and him being able to recruit at a high level and get us where we need to be.
Greg, he's going to have to win ball games, and it's not going to be easy. So looking over some of the questions, and Sherrell's not with us, so I'm going to kind of avoid a lot of the recruiting stuff, and Joey can have Sherrell on the coast to coast.
He is in the chat, by the way, Tommy. So Gregory might be able to filter some things to him. He is in the YouTube chat with very minimal power on his phone, he said.
Yeah, he said he's sitting in the dark on the patio with a dying battery.
Well,
that is perfect for Sherrell, what he's done.
The most dedicated man I've ever seen in my life.
He deserves to just sit and watch.
Somebody needs to tell Sherrell to drive to the McDonald's. They got free Wi-Fi. They got some great coffee. At least I think it's great coffee, and to join us. But no, so he can answer a lot of those questions. But Greg, the question I have is coaching these guys. He answered the question about the Carolina way and what he wants to do, but clearly it can't stay the same. They've got some work to do on recruiting talent. So how does he mesh his past and what he believes is tried and true with the current environment? And then you have, which was not unexpected, Armando Bacot testing the waters here. Every new head coach has a ton to do. I don't know if too many head coaches are in the position of Hubert Davis with the weight of North Carolina basketball on him going forward until practice starts. But how's he do it, Greg?
I think this is going to be the challenge, and this is where a lot of the skepticism and concern comes from when we're talking about Hubert Davis. Is yes, he was in the NBA for 12 years. Yes, he understands the importance of the three-point shot, right? I mean, he's third all time in three-point field goal percentage at the NBA level. The guy can knock down some threes. The problem is he may be the best three-point shooter on the team right now, other than Kerwin. And that's something that they have to improve. And I think the question is, he knows things have changed. He knows things need to change, but yet he's been on this staff for 9 years. And he's brought in kind of as a shooting guru for a lot of these guys. And North Carolina is kind of in the position it is. I mean, that was one of the questions that I got a couple times this weekend is, if things need to change, why are you just moving up somebody that was an assistant coach on the current staff? There's a lot that we can dive into there, but those are the kind of things that he's going to have to address in terms of, we know that Roy Williams really kind of ran the show in terms of recruiting and in terms of how he ran practices. I'm sure Brooke can really give us a detailed conversation and some of that stuff. I'm sure he's got insight there. But how much did Roy Williams actually allow other guys to do? How much did he delegate? And those are some questions that we don't have answers for at this point in time. And so that's kind of the stuff he's got to wade through. Maybe he's always wanted to, recruit differently. Maybe he's wanted to coach differently, and perfectly fine. That's kind of why we're asking questions about recruiting and style of play today. I'll never forget, Larry Fedora talked about when he played for Fisher DeBerry. Fisher DeBerry always wanted to throw a pass. He just wanted to throw it left to right. And Larry was like, well, why don't you do what you're doing and throw it downfield a little bit? And that's why Larry was on the cutting edge of the spread movement, 25 years ago. And so that's the kind of things that I'm waiting to hear from him. And it may be until we get into the season next year where we start to see some of his own touches come into play. And then he'll say, well, I always wanted to kind of do this. But right now we don't know those things. And so adding his own personal touch is how he makes it work. He's just got to figure out which are the personal touches that are going to work, which ones will not, because not everything he's going to decide to do is going to be right. That's how it goes for everybody. And figuring out which ones will work, I think, is kind of the key.
Yeah, and to follow Greg, for as fun as that press conference was, there is going to be a ton of external pressure on Hubert Davis to win games right away. And it's not like, I don't think anybody's expecting him to be cutting down the nets next year, but this Carolina team, I think everybody can agree, has to be significantly better than the team that we've seen the past 2 years. And I'm not totally sure how prepared this current roster as it is can win next year at that level that a lot of fans are expecting Carolina to kind of get back to. And I think Hubert was pretty realistic, and he was pretty honest saying that this is a team that they're going to have to take a long look at the transfer portal. I wrote this quote down where he said, we've got to go to the transfer portal and find big time players that want to be a part of this unbelievable program that can play right away. I understand we need more shooters. We need more versatility in our bigs. We need to be better defensively. And those are all things that they plan to address, and they will next year. And I thought that was an interesting part where he was kind of upfront, knowing that the standard of Carolina basketball isn't where it should be. It isn't where they hope it to be, and that this team has to improve, and they have to improve pretty fast.
Yeah, this isn't. I was thinking about Mac's introductory press conference versus today, and we talk about winning the press conference, and they both obviously did it. Both of their introductory press conferences were incredible, given the programs that they were taking over. Mac was taking over a football program in shambles. Hubert Davis is taking over a basketball program to prevent it from getting there. I think that's an important distinction as far as, like, UNC basketball is not in shambles right now. Yes, 2 years ago was not great. We all know the reasons why that kind of happened as far as injuries and things like that, and not having the normal big men and just a whole bunch of stuff. And then this year could have been better. There were a lot of games that they could have won. And it just kind of didn't work out as far as Caleb Love being consistent and things like that. But to your point, Vip, about what Hubert was trying to project and discuss is, look, we're going to win next year. And so with Mac, it was, we need to make a bowl game. Like, right? Like his were baby steps of, all right, let's win 6 games. Let's win our bowl game. And then let's try to compete for the Coastal and then kind of work our way up from there. I mean, Hubert and UNC and fans expect to be back into the top 4 of the ACC next year. And based on what he said today, he's understands what's needed, other than maybe not fully answering your question, Greg, about Styles. But to his point, he's been hired for only 24 hours. But I think he understands, and we'll see. He hasn't coached a game yet. And I was a skeptic. I'm still a skeptic because he hasn't coached a game yet. He hasn't landed a recruit. I'm confident in his ability to recruit. I mean, I know he was at the forefront of guys like Cole, and maybe a few others. And if he had a good conversation with Walker Kessler tonight, I know Rel reported on that. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that's the difference between Mac and Hubert as far as what they're taking on and what they need to accomplish right away.
So I want to jump in real quick. I think Vip kind of hit on something that jumped out at me in the press conference today, and that was Hubert Davis trying to reposition North Carolina recruiting, kind of like putting it a little more on an elite status, as opposed to kind of going after some of these 5-star blue chip kids and trying to convince them to come to North Carolina. I heard him saying a little bit about, y'all need to want to be a part of this. Brooke, I want to ask you, how did Coach Smith recruit you? Was that kind of a mindset there? And I realized that, each recruiting relationship is different, but it was very refreshing to hear Davis say again, and I'm paraphrasing here, but we're North Carolina. This is an amazing experience. This is, a lifetime of family, you should want to be a part of this and be all in as a part of this. What was your recruiting experience like with Coach Smith, and do you feel like that's any different, or will it go back towards what Hubert Davis intimated at today?
Yeah, I think you made a very key point. He said, North Carolina, we are the standard, and we got to get that back to that, to where the kids understand, that they want to be a part of this. It's not just a stopover per se. I mean, we want to be a program that ultimately gets you to where you want to go. But we don't want guys just to come in a pit stop and be gone, and so mine was kind of unique. I was kind of a late bloomer and whatnot, but when Coach Smith called, I mean, my whole world stopped. Of course, I mean, it was I thought somebody was pranking me, to be quite honest with you. And so, we need to get back to that level to where, when Coach Davis calls, I mean, the kids know that, he means business, and that we are the standard. And we got to get back to, I think to a certain degree for some of these kids, we do need to get in a little bit earlier here and there. I think nowadays kids are a little bit different, where as my world kind of stopped and I was immediately, let's do this, there's a lot of kids that aren't wired that way nowadays. So maybe Hubert gets in a little earlier with some of these kids and establishes those relationships a little bit earlier. Even though we are the standard, I still think at times we do need to get a little bit earlier to kind of get attention of some of these kids and maybe steer them our way. So, obviously we've pulled in a fair number of high-rated kids recently, but we do need some real wings to continue to kind of supplement to what we have.
What was
at
he
the
said
guard
today?
spot.
He's like, "Can you shoot?
Yeah.
You don't need screeners. Can you shoot?"
Yeah, obviously that's an area that has to improve. Dynamic wing play, we kind of talked about. Tommy and Dewey and I talked about a good bit this year. Dynamic wing play, we got to have more production from the wings. Obviously some versatility from Leaky is great, but we got to have more offensive production from those spots, and just more consistent production of a perimeter. And I think he's plans on addressing that. More versatility from the 4-man. I mean, somebody like a Jawad, somebody like a Marvin, somebody that's not just your traditional back to the basket big that happens to be in the trail post spot, on the secondary. We need to have somebody who can step in there and knock down that trail, 15-footer trail, 3-pointer, take it off the bounce occasionally, rip it and go. So, I think he knows what needs to be done, what needs need to be addressed, and I think he's looking forward to getting on that quick.
Let me take a second and talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. They are sponsors of this podcast and great friends of Inside Carolina and of Inside Carolina subscribers. I've said before, if you're a premium subscriber, not only do you have access to all these wonderful threads on the Inside Carolina Tar Pit and UNC basketball premium message boards, but a lot of the questions that I'm seeing, they are full fleshed out answers on the message board, the premium message boards right now. And if you're a premium subscriber, you get 10% off your Johnny T-shirt order. Great gear, football, basketball, of course, all the throwback stuff you need, baseballs out there, every school of journalism shirts. I mean, you can get anything you need in the helm gating and tailgating gear from Johnny T-Shirt and johnnytshirt.com, and they'll bring it to your door, and you get 10% off your order. Take another short break. Let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be back with this live roundtable, the Hubert Davis hire. All right, boys, back for the second segment. Greg, I'm going to come to you with this. This is Inside Carolina Live podcast on YouTube stream. Greg Barnes, Michael Brooker, Gregory Hall, Taylor VIppolis, and the Joey Powell joining us. Greg, clearly Hubert Davis's staff and who's going to be on it is right on up there with recruiting talk on the premium message boards as we speak. There's some news and notes on this message board. I'm going to let you share what you can. I will say this, a name that I see bantied about, I saw this weekend, and then they disappeared. I found it quite interesting that they disappeared on a beautiful.
They got zapped up into the ether, man. They know when there's a disturbance in the force.
And it was absolutely flawless weather to disappear from. Anyway, Greg, staff update.
Well, I think we've got most of our current intel behind the paywall. So if you're listening to this and you're not a member of Inside Carolina Premium, I suggest you do so. But I think it's pretty clear. If you're familiar with Carolina basketball and the Carolina family, and you listen to Hubert Davis's press conference today, there's only a handful of guys that he's talking about, right? I mean, he said it's got to be a Carolina guy. He wants somebody that played for Dean and wants somebody that played for Roy. And of course, Bill Guthridge is in there being under Dean. And then you start to think about the potential options. The other tidbit to throw in is the fact that during some of the interviews this weekend, some head coaches were asked, would they consider potentially being assistant coaches on the North Carolina staff? And so when you start kind of running through some names, I mean that the list is pretty small. I think the fact that you've got guys on staff that are Carolina guys. I mean, Sean May certainly is trying to work his way up the ladder, trying to make his presence known by getting a spot on the coaching staff. That's kind of been a goal of his. But you look at other guys, and one of the issues, and it's an issue on one hand and it's a blessing on another, is that the North Carolina basketball coach tree has not been as successful as maybe people think it should be. You've got the Jeff Lebos, King Rice, Wes Miller, the obvious ones. I don't really consider Mark Turgeon in the Carolina family, even though he has strong ties to Roy from his days at Kansas, even though Roy inherited him from Larry Brown. But those are about your main guys who've had some success and coached at the high level. Jared Haas is, I guess he's a Carolina guy at this point in time. CB McGrath was at Wilmington, but the list is pretty small, and so I think those are the key candidates that Hubert's looking at, and I suspect we'll know the makeup of that staff sooner than later. We have a pretty good idea of who it's going to be right now, and that is on the IC Premium Board.
Indeed, it is. That's why I told folks to join Inside Carolina Premium Message Boards. There's a lot of information out there. Of course, you can surf other outlets and other.
Wait, Tommy. There are actually people that aren't premium members of Inside Carolina.
There are.
Who are these clowns?
Sources say, I don't know. Let me ask Michael Brooker a question. Mike, I know you coach a little bit of basketball, but I need a hookup down near Atlanta, so you need to stay there.
I am.
But you're what did we've talked about Roy Williams's ways and how he ran his program, and it was him, and it was he was the guy, and the assistants did their stuff, but it was be all end all with Roy. What was it like when you were there under Guthridge, of course recruited by Dean, under Guthridge, and then to the point that this is going to be an all Carolina family job? What was it like to be on a Carolina team where they weren't Carolina guys?
Yeah, that was definitely a unique experience, as probably has been talked about a lot. Coach Guthridge obviously was the big man coach, and Coach Ford and Coach Hanners, with guards, and so they delegated pretty well. Coach really delegated and obviously breakdown work and drill work, and and guys, I think the coaching staff felt comfortable to interject whenever needed. But obviously it was Coach's show. But Coach Doherty, it was different coming from guys who hadn't been there with you and hadn't been in that Carolina system. I mean, we obviously we're cursed at quite a bit, and so it was just a different style. Guys from different coaching backgrounds. Coach Wojcik, fiery Navy guy. Coach Bob McKinnon, Coach Q was kind of a Coach Quarterbaum, who's at Kansas now, was kind of the, yo, how was college today kind of guy. That was always his thing, and just a real personable, so it was different, you knew what to expect with Coach Ford and Coach Guthridge and Coach Hanners, and it was just kind of the way they had been groomed in the Carolina system. So, I think that is important to have that. I don't know, that somebody couldn't come in and do really well here that maybe didn't have that background, but I understand where Hubert's coming from. He definitely wants guys that value Carolina, that love Carolina, that that can impart that into the guys and just make it the best experience possible for them. So
I tell you, we had CB McGrath on, Joey and I did, this past Saturday, and to listen to him talk about it. But the funny Roy story, and if you haven't listened to that, you need to go find it on chapelboro.com. And Joey, you remember this one? He said that he wanted to play zone, and he kept trying to get Roy to play zone, and he kept saying it over and over and over, but he didn't know if Coach Williams heard him at all. And so there was another case where he kept saying it. And then Roy finally turned around and said, I freaking heard you.
But he didn't use
time.
freaking. That's what CB
Yeah,
said.
but
He
CB
used
said
the real
he did
F-bomb.
not did use the, yeah, you got to have guys. I believe you got to have guys that understand what the ultimate goal is. And I've always said it's different at Carolina. Vip, from not growing up a Carolina fan to being a Carolina fan and talking to some former players, what are they thinking here? I know some of your buddies have been bandied about as guys that should come on staff.
Yeah, I think that's been my favorite part of the message board, seeing all the suggestions of people who should come on staff, whether it's somebody like Marcus, somebody like Kenny. I've seen Vince Carter. So people are kind of all over the place right now, but I think people like that it is somebody in the Carolina family when you're a part of the Carolina family. It's a very exclusive club. It's a club that has churned out national champions. Um, it's something where if you bring in an outsider, you kind of jeopardize the entire thing that Carolina basketball has built. And obviously, I get there is the catch 22 where you can start running out of Carolina guys to the point where you're taking lesser candidates, and that kind of devalues your program. But if these coaches can keep winning at a high level and representing North Carolina, it's going to be something that's great, because if you bring in an outsider, when Coach Fedora was getting replaced, for example, a lot of us were worried that we wouldn't have the connection to want to come back during the summer. We wouldn't have the connection to, get tickets to games. And obviously that all sounds really small to fans, but all those things kind of add up to where it does feel like a family atmosphere. And that's one thing Mac Brown has done a really great job from day one when he took over for Coach Fedora. Like, he reached out to guys that played for Coach Fedora. He reached out to guys that played for Butch Davis and was like, "Hey, I don't care what year you played for Carolina. This is your family. We want you to feel like you always have a place to come home to." And that's something that, with Hubert Davis, obviously, the Carolina basketball family is still going to have a very strong presence, where you do have things like the pickup games, you have the reunions, all things that kind of come along with that territory.
I think that's a great point, Vip. One of the big things I think, and I mentioned on the show last week, the Carolina family is both a blessing and a curse. But this is a situation where I absolutely think it's a blessing, because one of the biggest knocks against Hubert Davis was that he didn't have any head coaching experience. But if he's able to fill out a staff of good candidates, you look at what Jawan Howard has done at Michigan, immediately coming in, bringing in a consigliere type like a Phil Martelli, able to implement some NBA things, but also he understands Michigan culture. Well, the North Carolina family culture is that on steroids, like to the nth degree. And I think that where this will be a blessing is you've automatically got guys that are going to want to come back and help this summer. They realize that COVID may have eliminated a lot of this current team's momentum and potential. So I get the feeling that not only are they going to want to come back to see Coach Davis and wish him well. Scott Williams said that today on the ACC Network, that he can't wait to get back to actually see a game, because he played with Hubert Davis. But folks are going to want to come back to see Coach Davis and get him started on the right foot. And that's where I think this family atmosphere was absolutely, going back to Sherrell's quote about maybe not the best coach, but the right coach. This is where it's absolutely, I think, going to pay dividends. And Greg, I keep going back to what you said earlier about what's wrong with being a nice guy. The fear that a lot of folks kept making on the message boards this week and on social media was just connecting Hubert to being a failed experiment like Matt Doherty was. And I think in his book and in some interviews he's done, Coach Doherty has always said his attitude was probably not what it should have been. I don't think you're going to have those issues with Hubert Davis. I don't think he's coming in with the ego. I think he's coming in firmly understanding, the lineage that he's hired to caretake and what he's expected to do. And it goes back to what you said earlier, he's expected to win games. I'm going to ask this question to Greg, and I want Brooke to chime in too. And actually, you five dudes want to answer, it'd be great. What's the first big thing he can do? He's won the press conference, that's behind him. We talked about, there's potential in bringing back certain players in the transfer portal. Is it signing a new kid? Is it getting an offer out to somebody? What's the first big thing he needs to do right now? Greg, go
Well,
first.
If he can somehow get Walker Kessler back in the fold, I think that wins him a ton of goodwill, and that immediately makes next year's team better, and it makes his job a lot easier. Beyond that, it's the transfer portal. One of the things, what I asked Roy last week was if the changing tide of college basketball, the one-time transfer rule that's about to take place, name, image, and likeness. We didn't even get into that with Ruth Hubert today. But the transfer deal, Roy's had 4 transfers in his time at Carolina that he brought in 18 years. All 4 of them were grad transfers. Now, no doubt there's a lot of difficulties in bringing in transfers the regular way in North Carolina. Same goes for football. We've talked about that a lot over the years. But Roy just didn't like that approach. And part of it was he's really big on loyalty and commitment. Like if you commit to go to school, do it. So Hubert has said that he's going to look in the portal to find some options. And if he's able to find somebody who can play stretch 4, or maybe find a dynamic wing, which for whatever reason, Roy Williams really struggled to sign elite wings recently, even though you have guys like Justin Jackson sitting there as an example. But if you can do any of those 3 things, all of a sudden, not only is your team better, but you gain instant credibility with the fan base and on a national scale. And that's 4 months before you even play a game. So I think that's where he starts.
Brooke, I'll let you answer that too. Joey's question: What does he need to do now?
I hate to just say to reiterate what Greg said, but I think re-recruit this roster. Obviously Baycott coming back would be huge. I think he's probably just testing the waters, just kind of get a feel for where he stands, but I don't see him leaving personally. Getting Kessler back in the mix would be gigantic, I think, as Greg said, just not only for next year's success, but just showing that Hubert's able to maybe mend a situation that got ugly, and he's able, through his sheer force of personality and goodwill and genuine nature, just is able to get him back in the mix. I think that would go a long, long way. Once again, piggyback and just gotta find some wing help and some versatility at the 4 spot, as you saw in those games over the weekend, with Jaime Jaquez and some of those guys that are just versatile, that can mix it up, that can play the 3, play the 4, that can take people off the bounce, still can run secondary, but you swing it to a guy at the top of the key that can knock down a shot or take somebody off the bounce or go with a quick dribble handoff, pick and pop situation. I think that would be huge to kind of open us up and be a little less predictable offensively with those 2 traditional bigs on the court, and just kind of open the world up for some of our offensively, some of our stuff. So, like I said, I probably pretty much just piggybacked on what Greg said, but I think that was all dead on accurate as far as what he needs to do. Because obviously you can't win a game from now until, so you got to have something to hang your hat on. And I think re-recruiting some of these guys, and obviously, getting to work on the 22 class, maybe making a big splash with a guy like a Jaden Bradley, some of those guys that, getting a 22 in the mix, I think will also kind of keep that momentum rolling as well.
Yeah, this is also where you're re-recruiting players. I think since this is a fresh start for Carolina with head coach, it has to be a fresh start for everybody on the roster. I know one of the scoops that came out, I think it was from Rel, about why certain players were looking to transfer. They didn't feel like their performances in practice were kind of correlating to playing time. And I think that's going to be something big for Hubert to kind of establish right away for this team. Like if you're balling out in practice, I don't care if you're a senior, I don't care if you're a freshman, that's going to kind of dictate who's playing. And I think that goes a long way in a locker room when the coach is putting the best guys out there. And I get where the loyalty comes from, but you also have to have that sense in the locker room that the team that we're putting out every night is the best version of ourselves. And I think that can get clouded when you start looking at, this guy's a senior, this guy's a junior, this guy is a freshman, when you just have to find your best players and play your best players a majority of the minutes.
That is, and Gregory, I want you to answer that. But that is one thing I thought of is this a clean slate type deal? And we can debate it. And somebody asked, is re-recruiting Kessler a slap in Roy's face? I don't think so. I think it's a clean slate type deal. Anyway, Gregory, what's he got to do first? And you can't say recruiting.
I was gonna say recruiting, but I was gonna say I wasn't gonna say it. Obviously, bringing in Walker Kessler and Armando Bacot are huge, grabbing the back. But I think Hubert needs to show that he can recruit new players. If he can bring in a star out of the transfer portal quickly, and show that he's attacking it fast and get it done by, I don't know, the end of next week, something like that, and be like, he's hopped on it, he's talking to people, and it doesn't have to be a transfer. It can be like a Jonas Idu type of person in the 21 class, right? Like if he can show that, because I think a lot of with college sports in general, recruiting wins games, right? You can make in-game adjustments and things like that, but you need the talent on the floor first. And so I think a lot of concerns with Hubert isn't his basketball knowledge. I mean, the man's been around basketball his entire life. We know he has basketball knowledge. We also know that he can recruit for Roy Williams. Can he recruit for Hubert Davis and say, hey, come play at Carolina? We know the history. You know the history Carolina has. And if they're too young, lay it out. But also, it's look at Roy Williams. Look what he's done. I mean, this guy he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's won championships. But now I'm a first-year head coach. So if he can still get guys and get them fast and get a guy, like I said, by the end of next week, that's just an arbitrary timeline. I don't know what will make people happy, but that's my thing. My big thing that he needs to do is to prove that he can get a new guy, convince them to come to Carolina, and do it fast.
Agree with that. You got a question for the group? You mentioned you had a question.
Yeah. What would be a failure year one for Hubert Davis next season? Like, we're looking back and like we're doing a live podcast at the end of next season, and we're rating Hubert Davis's first year. What would be a failure?
So I guess what's a realistic expectation?
I think shooting has to improve. I feel like that's kind of a low bar, and knowing Hubert's proclivity as a shooter in the NBA and at North Carolina, whether that means bringing in somebody that can shoot better, whether that means a guy like Puff Johnson getting more minutes because he's healthy and working into the rotation, whether that means running an offense that gets more shots for perimeter shooters. But I think it has to be the team needs to shoot better than they shot this year, whether it's from 3 or from 2 or from the free throw line. North Carolina needs to shoot better. And I think if they shoot better, then you might win some more games. I know that's kind of a no crap exclusive, but just throwing that out there. I think if they could shoot better, then that's a win. But if they don't, I feel like that's an immediate kind of top mark on his first year.
Greg, what do you think? Because I'm sitting here thinking about when Roy took over, and Matt Doherty. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. They went 8-20, and then NIT, was that the NIT year after 8-20? And then Roy comes, and that's when they lost to
Texas.
Texas in the
They
second
were
round.
19 and
Beat Air
11, I
Force
think
and
that
lost to
year.
Texas.
Yeah, 19 and 11 that first year.
But I think we would agree that the talent on that team, or would we, that the talent on Roy's first year, depending on this transfer portal and Kessler, could be not as much, maybe. I don't know. What's a realistic expectation, Greg, looking way down the road, and we don't even know which direction the road goes. We just know who's driving the bus.
Well, when Roy coached that team to, I guess, a second round loss, Colorado, isn't that where they were, in Denver, maybe? He had come over from Kansas and had played in the national championship game the year before and was basically a god in Lawrence, Kansas. Completely different scenario here. I think the issue here is you hired a guy that has 9 years of coaching experience, all as an assistant coach. So there could be rough roads and bumps and bruises and all that ahead. And you just have to deal with it. You have to suck it up and deal with it. So I don't know that we're in a position to say, yeah, if they only win 18 games next year, it's a bad year. I mean, this is what you went for. It's not going to be easy for Hubert. Do I think there's a lot of potential there? Absolutely. But you have to understand that this is high risk, high reward. And everybody's happy because he had a good press conference, and they should. I mean, I thought it was great. I think he's a great guy. No doubt about it. Carolina through and through. But he has to prove that he can do all these things. He has to figure out that he can do all these things. He has to coach the guys up when it matters in crunch time without Roy Williams over there beside him. That's easier said than done. So the learning curve exists. And so I'm not going to hold him to any kind of standard for next year. I mean, he's got to go through the process. If he can have any kind of successful year, then I would consider it a successful year. I mean, if he gets the team to the NCAA tournament, celebrate, enjoy it, because that means better things are to come. But if for some reason this team struggles and maybe he's not able to get Walker to come back and they're a fringe bubble team and they don't make it, that doesn't mean he's a disaster. That means he's a first-year coach trying to find his way. And I know I'm speaking to people who don't want to hear that and may have a hard time with that a year from now. But if you hire a guy with no head coaching experience, you have to be willing to deal with those consequences. And it's okay as long as you think there's potential for growth down the road.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody can say it any better. Anybody else want to try, or we just want to leave it on Greg's words? Because I think that pretty much sums it up. Everybody in agreement there?
The chat.
Yeah, I want to follow that. Hang on, Gregory. I do
Oh,
wanna
there's
follow
always
that.
one. Go ahead, Joey.
Not going to bury it. Not going to bury it, because I think this is more of a corollary to what Greg just really perfectly said.
SAT words. All right.
If North Carolina fans miss developing players, which I've seen very often recently, they feel like the game has changed and you don't get a chance to see players develop in front of you and you don't get a chance to get attached to them, then they should love, and I hope they will dig into the same pocket of grace and share some with Hubert Davis as he develops, because that should be another potential bit of fun for this fan base for the next year or two, because you're going to get to not only see players develop, but you're going to get to see a coach develop right in front of your eyes. And I hope that folks will, give him some grace early on and recognize the wins when you have them. And, as Roy Williams used to always say, let's enjoy the journey rather than the destination, because as Barnes said a second ago, it's a high risk, high reward. And if there is a ceiling here, it's going to be very, very high. And I don't mean that the roof kind.
Well, there's a lot of incredibly successful coaches that started out as assistants. I mean, Coach Smith, Coach Guthridge, Dabo Swinney, Mark Few. I mean,
Roy Williams.
Roy Williams, Coach K. I mean, those are guys. I'm not saying Hubert's going to be those guys per se or have those careers of winning multiple championships. But I mean, obviously,
it's not a foreign path.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
it's not a foreign path at all.
And it's different in today's world, of course, with the social media and the constant scrutiny at every turn, on every call, on every game. But I mean, it's been done before. It's obviously amplified with all the eyes and the social media and the TV presence, of course. But it's not a path that hasn't been traveled by many great coaches. So, like you said, patience. Obviously, a little more difficult in today's society and the weight of Carolina basketball. But nonetheless, I think he has the moxie to get it done. But and built up enough goodwill from his career, from his coaching career, from his playing career. But we'll see if that actually transpires, if he is awarded that little bit of grace and a little bit of time to develop on the bench. So hopefully everyone will give him that.
Joey opened the floodgates with everybody chiming in. So now I feel like I have
Way
to
to go,
chime in.
Joey. Way to go.
Greg-
Look at Tommy.
Greg,
Tommy
I
was
tried.
ready to wrap it up. He was like, I got to get out of here.
When
It's
I'm
like a
looking
cool
at
hour.
when I'm looking at like what I expect this North Carolina team to be next year, I would just like to see them have an identity where you look at them this year and you don't recognize the team you're watching from game to game. And I thought the quote of the press conference from Hubert Davis is when he said, North Carolina is going to show up every game, every possession, every second. North Carolina will be there. I want to see a North Carolina team that just comes out and competes. If they win a bunch of games, okay. If they go 500, okay. If they make the tournament, miss the tournament, whatever. I just want to see consistent performances from North Carolina to where you're not questioning their effort. You're not questioning what coaches said to them before the game, where they come out looking absolutely flat and then the second half they turn it on. So I kind of want to see North Carolina start to build that identity where they were in years past, and it's kind of been missing the past 2 years.
And I think if you go back to that 05-06 season, granted UNC was coming off a national championship, that makes it a lot easier. But even though that team wasn't elite, they won a lot of big games. But those kids played hard, and that was our first glimpse of Tyler Hansbrough. And I think the fact that Tyler pushed that team, and I mean David Noel, of course, is on that team as well. They played hard every night, and even though they lost some games and had some spotty stretches of play, fans really grabbed onto that. And to Taylor's point, if they see a team that busts their rear ends, regardless if they win or lose, I think fans really appreciate that. And one of the things we talked about in recent years with some of Roy's teams is there seems to be games where guys has come out flat. And when you know a team's got a lot of talent and that happens, it's easy to get frustrated. But even if you don't have the best talent or you have a coach learning his way, you can still play hard. And we'll be able to see that pretty early.
You guys brought up sorry, Tommy.
No, you go ahead, man. I'm just here.
You guys brought up the path of assistant coach to greatness, and I think Hubert put it perfectly today, talking about not feeling pressure. He's like, I don't feel pressure. I know Coach Williams is great. Like, Coach Williams is great. I'm Hubert. Like, I'm not going to be Coach Williams. I'm not going to be Coach Smith. I'm not going to be Coach Guthridge. I'm going to be Hubert Davis. And so he understands that. And I think that's important. Putting your own stamp on the program and doing what you want to do. He's not going to try to be somebody else, which I think at times in anything we can kind of get lost in trying to be someone we're not, or trying to do something that we're not capable of, or I don't know if capable of is the right word, but not comfortable with. He's going to do what he's comfortable with and what he feels is best. So he's not afraid of not living up to expectations, or else they wouldn't have hired him. So
look at the young guy making the life lesson. Yeah, he philosophizing. How many great coaches were never an assistant? Naismith?
John Beelon.
He was never even an assistant. Is he?
Where is he now?
He was always a head coach from day one.
Wow.
Well, where is he now?
Well, Wes Miller was a
Beelon
assistant
he's
for what,
about
like 3
80
years
now, isn't he?
Somebody said they should go outside the family. Like, they went outside the family with Dean Smith, and I'm like, what? Dean Smith is like, no.
There wasn't a family before Dean Smith.
It was just like, he's the godfather, man. There was no family before then. Anyway, I agree with what everybody said here, and I'm going to try to wrap it, but if somebody wants to interrupt me and keep it rolling.
I had one more question.
Okay, let me say what I want to say. And then
Go for it.
And if there's any questions on the live stream, ask them. I want to see them play like UCLA played, like Baylor played, like all these teams in the tournament that even if they're less talented, they play their asses.
Dogs.
Yeah, and I mean, Baylor is the standard this year.
It's because they're all 30 years old. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it gets harder when you get old. But, that's what I want to see from Carolina. And we've seen that in the past, and we have not seen that over the last couple of years. And that's what, if I'm speaking from what I hear from most of the fan base, that's it right there. Because most people think if you play hard and you play like you're supposed to be, you play smart, play hard, play together, then they'll win. They will win because they'll have enough talent to win. Anyway, go ahead, Gregory. Wrap it up.
We talked a lot about recruiting, but we kind of mentioned the current players. Somebody in the chat brought up the backcourt with Caleb and RJ and Kerwin, and the jump that they're kind of expected to make from freshman to sophomore year. We saw Armando do it, but Armando did it with the same coaches and the same coaching staff. Does having Hubert Davis, a new head coach, and him bringing on new staff affect that freshman to sophomore jump, into what capacity. I think that's something interesting to think about, because we obviously saw Caleb's struggles. We saw flashes of his potential, and it's like, oh, freshman to sophomore jump, he'll be a guy next year. But there's a roadblock or an obstacle here with a new coaching staff. How does that play a role?
That sounds like a Brooke question.
Yeah, Brooke. Okay, look.
Brooke
How
was
was
laid
the
back.
deal?
He was like, I'm chilling. Like,
So, and you can speak to it right here. Those guys that went from transition from, you didn't play for Dean, but transition from Gut to Doherty. How was that transition between those two coaching staffs? Even though I don't think Hubert's going to be that much different from Roy other than modernized. Anyway.
I mean, I think that was one of the major causes of contention throughout the whole thing, was just the manner in which, we were not used to that style.
You mean the timing of it, Brooke? Or do you mean like the actual way he coached?
I think the way he coached, the way in which he spoke to us, the way in which he
Okay.
approached us, like, I've never, ever, I've always gave maximum effort when I played, and I got challenged and cussed out on multiple occasions that I wasn't playing hard enough, whatever. And I just, we didn't handle that well, I don't think, so Coach Doherty gets a lot of heat for the way, and a lot of it, and he will admit and has admitted, deservedly so. But I think a lot of times we as players didn't look in the mirror and adjust and adapt the way we needed to maybe make his time a little more successful. So I think there's a little bit of blame all to go around to everybody in that scenario. Obviously, there were a lot of mistakes made. I don't think that'll be the case here, obviously, with the transition. You may have some new blood come in with, I don't know I'm not going to go into the behind the scenes as far as who those are going to be, but as y'all have touched on with the IC premium stuff, but there's going to be some new ideas. There's probably going to be some new ways to push buttons from some new people on the staff. And I think that'll be good. And for some of these young guys, these freshman guys that are going to hear some different voices, although Carolina voices, but maybe spoken a little differently, maybe different verbiage, et cetera. And that'll be beneficial for them. But it was a shock for us, and I think we didn't handle it well. But I think this transition will be really smooth, and guys will be ready. And based off of what they've done in the past couple of years, I think they'll be hungry to get back to where we need to be in the pecking order.
And when you look at RJ Davis and Caleb Love specifically, I think for them to take that freshman to sophomore leap, the first thing you're going to have to do is surround them with shooters to actually give them a chance. Because when I talk to people who know a lot more about basketball than me, it's like when you're an attack first point guard like those guys are, and you're looking and the entire paint is just collapsed into where you want to attack and where you make your living as an attack first point guard. Not a lot of people are going to succeed in that scenario. So I think before you could expect them to make this incredible freshman to sophomore leap, you have to give them a chance and surround them with a roster that is beneficial to their play style. And that is surrounding them with as many shooters and floor spacers as you can. Kind of like when you have a guy like Kobe White, who's a similar attack first point guard. You have Cam Johnson, who's one of the best three-point shooters to ever come through North Carolina. You have a big like Luke May who could space the floor. So I think you need to see more of a roster like that. And kind of like Greg was mentioning before, it's not easy to find a Justin Jackson or a Cam Johnson on the wing. So this North Carolina team obviously is going to have their work cut out for them when they're looking at the transfer portal and when they're looking at recruits coming in.
Very interesting. Ton of information on InsideCarolina.com and, of course, on the premium stuff. I've been trying. People are busting on me. I've been trying to get recruit Sherrell into this podcast. Sherrell's having technical difficulties, so he's going to have to maybe bow out. I keep dragging it out. I feel like I'm
in Cabarrus County, hooked up to a generator in front of his house, probably.
He is now at the Wi-Fi with the free Wi-Fi at McDonald's. Anyway, yeah. I do want to send a shout out to Sherrell and to Greg and to Ross and to everybody.
And Ross, yeah.
Ben Sherman. Hey, Ben Sherman, I think he works harder than any of us, so he deserves kudos as well.
So Greg
called me today. I thought he wanted me to come over and wash his car, and I was going to go do it. So that's
So, Greg, answer this question for me so people understand what Inside Carolina does. How many man hours have been spent since the first text or the first call that Roy was going to retire?
Oh, gracious. Ben and I talked. Let's see. The news came out Thursday morning at 10. Ben and I talked probably 9:15. That's when we kind of got word of it. At the time, we were like, okay, it's got to be April's Fools, right? And since that time, I mean, a lot. Long days, but that's you have stretches like this where it's typically you don't have a stretch where you have a retirement and you have to do all this. I mean, if you look at IC, we've got a ton of content up just on Roy and what he meant to this
Everything's
program.
pinned, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, so we were fully expecting. I mean, I went home Sunday. We were fully expecting this to kind of play out this week, but not Monday. We thought, at least let Gonzaga get through the national championship game and check any bases there. But yeah, it's been a heck of a couple days, but that's what we do, and we've done that for a long time. So there's fun to it, but
Tommy,
at the end of it, you're exhausted.
So
Tommy,
let me do this.
You can bet your Joko behind that Greg Barnes is glad that it's done before the Master starts on Thursday.
You not lying a bit. I'm happy as a lark to say that.
Well, what's interesting to me is I'm fixing to blow this podcast up right here.
Uh-oh.
And if anybody needs to dip out, Greg, if you need to dip, I know it's been long.
I gotta go. I'm crashing hard.
All right. I will
this COVID shot
gladly
has beat me
replace
down.
this guy. I will gladly replace
you guys are
this
trading
guy.
up. Trust
Bye,
me.
Joey.
We are trading up. Joey, get well soon, brother.
All right. See y'all. Appreciate it.
We drop Joey. We add.
There he is.
Sherrell, I just want to say hi. I'm just thinking up.
Look, Joey don't want to leave now.
Whatever.
I'm not. Yeah, Tommy, I'm not giving Sherrell a spot. I'm giving him my spot. Shout out.
Sherrell McMillan. So
did you go buy a generator? Is that what we're?
No, the city of Concord is very efficient when it comes to getting power restored, evidently. So
Nice,
it just came back on. Yeah.
All right.
I made some calls, Sherrell.
Good work, Sherrell, and I'm bowing out, guys. Enjoyed it.
Yep. Later, Greg.
Greg Barnes, dip out. Sherrell, we have talked on this podcast about a lot of stuff that's behind the InsideCarolina.com paywall, and I've encouraged people to subscribe as much as possible. And if they haven't by now, I'm not sure what else there is to do. But first, let me get your thoughts on all of this. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I guess when we did this podcast, was it April 1st? When you said that the right might not be the best. Where are you on that statement now after watching the last day or so and then after seeing the press conference and know what you've learned even since the press conference?
I think that's kind of the decision that Bubba had to make. The athletic director, Bubba Cunningham. I think if they really, pushed hard, maybe there could have been a little more traction, with other candidates. And I'm sure that, they had back channels and they talked to people. But, he said it in an interview on ACC Network. It was kind of like after he interviewed Hubert Davis, he was like, I found my guy. And that's who I knew. He knew that that's who he was going to recommend that they hire. So I think what we saw, in the press conference with Hubert Davis and what, like we've seen over the last day really is why it's such a difficult job for someone if you haven't been a part of Carolina basketball before. And I know that bothers people to some degree, but it's just a reality. With any job that you have, there are going to be qualifications, and the qualifications are set by the employer. And one of the qualifications at Carolina is that you understand and respect the culture and those who have come before you. And that's why I think Hubert Davis is going to be the head coach. It's not the only reason. Don't get me wrong, but I think that was obviously a huge part of it.
You talked to a lot of players, obviously, both at Carolina, not yet come to Carolina, being recruited by Carolina. What is the overarching thought on this hire?
Yeah, they seem to like it. I mean, I haven't really spoken with anyone who's connected to the program who has been, you know, not supportive, I should say. I mean, I think various guys had, you know, their guy or someone who may, they think may have done a little bit of better job. But I think, you know, they're all supportive. They're all, you know that the demands on this job are special and they are unique, and that I know that makes people want to throw up on the outside because you keep talking about the Carolina family and the, you know, the Carolina way and all that good stuff, but it's a real thing. And now you have someone like Bubba Cunningham who's validated it not just once but twice in the hires that he's made, in especially in uh, football and then men's basketball. So um, I think it's not something that's just a creation. It's not a myth. I think you've seen outsiders come in and experience, and you know that's why I think everyone is kind of on board with it. Again, different guys probably would have liked to have seen, you know, different people within the family get it. But once the hire was made, I think they've all started to rally around it. Is from, you know, what I've heard. But again, my connection is more, um, I would say, with the guys from, you know, pre 2014, and then kind of the guys and the players who are there now. So there's a little bit of a stretch there where you know, my relationships aren't quite as strong.
So looking at potential staff and not calling out any names, folks got to go to the premium message boards to do that. But what type staff does Hubert have to have to recruit effectively in today's climate? He's already said it's going to be all Carolina guys. What does that mean in recruiting circles, given how you've covered it over the last decade plus?
I think communication is a huge thing, that North Carolina maybe can improve upon. I think it's something that we've heard from time to time that maybe wasn't the best thing. Just whether or not, you know, clarity about whether or not a scholarship offer is a scholarship offer, clarity about whether or not I'm a primary or secondary target, clarity about when you want me to come to campus, clarity about what role you see me in when I get to campus, that kind of thing. So I think that's an easy fix and place to start at, you know, that they can knock out right away, just the communication part. From there, having Carolina on your sweater or your Nike sweater does make it a little bit easier. It's not a situation where it recruits itself anymore, which I think it did for some time, or at some point. But it does make it easier. So I think that's one. You have to recognize that. But then from there, I think guys, there are two different types of players, I think, right now. For one, everybody wants to get into the NBA. So whether you are ranked 947th or you're ranked number 2, you feel deep down in your heart that you're going to play in the NBA one day. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but that is the reality. So there's that. So you have to cater to that to some degree. And there are things that come along with that, which is, you know, guys maybe not initially will be having the team number one on their mind. And that can change, obviously, once you get into practice and you understand. But, you know, guys, it's about paychecks. It's about making it to the NBA, making money. And so part of what Coach Davis and I think his staff have to do is identify the guys who find value in the things that they find value in. Like he talked about, you know, getting a great education at UNC, becoming the best person you can be, you know, finding, you know, a wife or a husband or whatever when you're on campus. I think that those are the things that he's going to try and sell when it comes to UNC. And it's just identifying, you know, some of the guys who want to play in the NBA, but also want those things too. Because there are some guys who just don't care about that at all, and they're not going to care no matter how much you talk to them about family in Carolina and all that. So really, I think identification is going to be a big deal for him. And then, like I said, communication. So if you can do those two things, I think you can find players who fit kind of the unique, uh, uh, kind of the unique situation that North Carolina has, where you want to get to the NBA, but you also want to be a part of something special.
Indeed. Brooke talked about that earlier. Of course, Hubert talked about it during his press conference. For the record, folks, that is E.H. Taylor, and this is Sunburn from being at Atlantic Beach all weekend. That's just shout out to the YouTube chat.
They've been all over Tommy. They've been like, what's he drinking? He's giggling. He's red as a tomato.
I'm happy, man. That's sunburn, though. It was, it was kind of hot, and when you're pale ass white, you get burned in a hurry. Walker Kessler, Sherrell. It's widely reported that Hubert wants him on the team. I think even Hubert said it himself. What do you make of that? Do you consider Kessler to be the biggest recruit out there for Hubert Davis at this point?
Yeah, I don't see how he couldn't be. I mean, Carolina has already lost, depending upon what Garrison Brooks does, the expectation has been that he's going to move on. So you lose him. Armando Bacot is testing the NBA draft process. So you don't know what could happen there. Sterling Manley has decided to enter the portal, and Day'Ron Sharpe has gone pro. So right now you have 0 big men who are 100%, certain to be on the roster next year. So yeah, I mean, and there's a top 15, top 20 big man who, almost had a triple double in the ACC tournament available. Now, there are some unique circumstances behind his availability since he was a Carolina player last year, but I don't see how you can, when you're trying to rebuild a program and you want the best players, how you can ignore someone who was in the program and chose to leave but hasn't signed anywhere else yet.
What about so we weren't surprised. I mean, Bacot testing, I guess the question is why wouldn't you test these days? But you laid out pretty detailed reasons why maybe you wouldn't test given the portal nature. Were you surprised that he announced that today?
Not surprised. And since we had that conversation, I think what's happened is they put some clarity around some of the dates. Forgive me if I don't have them off the top of my head, but I think it's June 17th is when you have to pull out by. I think that might be right, or that might be the combine, and then July 17th is when you had to pull out by. I think that is right, actually. So there's more structure in place now than there was before, at least, even though the timetable is pushed back by about 2.5 months from when it normally is. So that, if you were on the fence about testing because of that, now you have some clarity. And besides that, I mean, you're gonna get some good feedback. You're gonna get it from a different voice. We always talk about that. Hearing it from a different voice can be invaluable. It could be the same exact thing that Roy Williams told him last year and that Hubert Davis has started to tell him now, but just hearing it from an NBA scout, I think gives it a different gravitas, if you will. And so maybe that, you'll hear it and you'll act on it better. But I frankly, no inside information. I'd be surprised if he didn't play in Chapel Hill next year. I think this is more of a fact-finding mission so that he can do what he needs to do, and then next year, go for good into the draft. That's just my opinion too. That's editorializing. That is not a report or sourced or anything.
Go ahead, Gregory.
I just wanted to do a quick interruption. UNC baseball just beat number 11 South Carolina in extra innings 3-2.
A win.
They are
Nice.
quite an interesting team. I watched some of that.
Pitching staff held them to 3 hits and 2 runs, and UNC had 9 hits but could not scratch across runs. But then they scored in the top of the 10th and got it done. So sorry to interrupt.
They needed
basketball
that.
talk.
They did, because I saw the records.
They were on a steep decline.
Yeah, they started off strong. They seem to own South Carolina, though, at least over there in Charlotte in Knight Stadium. Last questions for Sherrell and Vip and Brooke and Gregory. If you have one, by all means, chime in. But we need to. It's about 10:25, so we're running up on it. Sherrell, the portal. We've talked about it over and over. That's just loaded with players. I guess more could declare at any time. But I mean, are we at max portal numbers at this point, do you think, or do you think it can continue to go up?
I think it's going to keep going up until they put some structure around it. Right now, we've all been told and everybody's saying that the one-time transfer is going to pass for next season, but it hasn't passed yet. And I think that is one of the things, or one of the reasons that so many kids are putting their name in, because they've been I'll say it, they've been tampered with by opposing schools through intermediaries and maybe directly, saying, hey, the one-time transfer is going to pass. You can come over here. We'll start you. You'll get, 25 shots a game or whatever. So that's happening. And then there hasn't been a date given that you have to withdraw or you have to be in the portal by. So again, theoretically, I know we've talked about this before, but theoretically, right now, as things stand, you could just say, I'm going to transfer and leave your school in limbo indefinitely, because there's no, like, you have to be, in order to be eligible in the fall, you have to be in the transfer portal by May 15th. There's no structure around it right now. So until they vote on it and until we find out kind of how it's going to be laid out, yeah, I think you're going to get more and more players because they see opportunity. And then for a school like Carolina, because they haven't taken anyone from the portal yet, that's not a bad thing because again, we've said this on a different podcast, but say player X from player Y from Y major conference becomes available because he's like, I just want to leave my school. Let's just say he's from Sam Houston State and he's the second best player in the country and he wants a higher profile. If you fill up now, like some of the schools are doing with players, then you won't have a scholarship for that player in a month. So I think North Carolina under Roe Williams and now under Hubert Davis has been pretty prudent about looking into the transfer portal and making sure that they find a good fit if they're going to really contact someone and go from there.
I think that's a good segue into my question for you, Rel, is Hubert Davis's recruiting abilities.
So just what are they? Or
yeah,
are they
just
good?
your thoughts on your thoughts on what he's been able to do the last 9 years, what his role has been, and how that role has changed with his. I mean, we talked a little bit last week about recruiting pitch and things like that, but just your thoughts on what he's done and now what he needs to do, and can he do it at the level he needs to?
Yeah, I think the latter is a question mark that has to be answered. I mean, I can't tell you he can't, and I can't tell you he can as the head coach. We've seen what he's done as an assistant coach, and he has a pretty good list of players. He was the lead recruiter for Garrison Brooks and Cole Anthony, Brandon Robinson, Kenny Williams, Tony Bradley. I see got a text from Tony Bradley's high school coach. We haven't talked to him in 5 years, and he sent us a text saying, great coverage. I'm really excited for Hubert, basically. So, even someone like Tony Bradley, who was only at Carolina for 9 months, still see the impact from Hubert Davis in the recruitment. Yeah, I think for him, it's going to be different just because he's the head coach. And I go back to the communication part of it. You just have to have a different level of communication with these players when you're the head coach because you're the closer. I think before, not saying he wasn't doing his job, but, he could talk to kids and kind of tee him up and then Roy Williams would come in and close. Well, now that's his job. So it's going to be a little bit different for him, I think. But with the way he talked at the press conference and the passion that you see for North Carolina kind of spill out, I think it'd be hard for a lot of people to say no to him. And then once he puts his staff together, I think they can do a lot of good things on the recruiting trail, especially with his idea of it seemed like a new era was like the whole messaging today, new era, modernizing, whatever you want to call it. I think he can do a really good job recruiting as long as he kind of holds true to that.
I could listen to you talk all day, Sherrell. Let me ask you. I think we ask everybody before, and I wanted to get your take on it. What are realistic expectations for this program going forward? We can say next season. I mean, you have always been the voice of reason on Inside Carolina, and quite often in a storm of unreasonableness. I mean, what should Carolina fans look to, and what should they expect, given that we have no idea what the roster is going to look like? I mean, what is good, what is bad for next season?
I think I think it's natural to expect improvement from a good deal of the roster who we think is going to come back. And trying to be careful because I know some people don't want it known yet that they're coming back or it's assumed or whatever, but kind of make of that from what you will. But I think a lot of the guys who played, good minutes last year, you have to think they'll take a leap. So that would be Caleb Lowe, for example. I think there's no question he's going to shoot better. I think you can see him shoot and realize that he's not a 22 or 23 or 24% shooter. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be 43, but 35, 36, that's a huge difference for North Carolina. I think you look at that. So you look at those guys for improvement. You talk about them going into the portal and then adding all that together with whatever system Hubert Davis wants to run. I mean, I would expect it to be kind of the second year of those, 3 and 4 year runs that Roy Williams typically has, where maybe the first year they go 18-11, 19-11, out of the tournament in the second round. I think you should still expect to see that team take the next step, because this isn't a real rebuild hire. This is a I don't want to say continuity because he's going to change things, but it kind of is a continuity hire. And so you would expect them to continue to take steps, even though they're going to be learning a tweaked system. So I would say, second weekend of the NCAA tournament, I think is what fans should be. I think that's reasonable considering the talent they have coming back, what they could add in the transfer portal, and then kind of reasonable improvements from all those guys who are returning.
Is that reasonable considering Roy couldn't do that the past 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about, or somebody talked about the kind of circumstances over the last couple of years, and I know people don't want to hear it, but these guys were freshmen last year. Like, it's hard as a freshman to play in the ACC. I think people forget that sometimes, and they'll be better as sophomores. And I think because you see that sophomore class getting better, and hopefully you see the juniors getting better, and hopefully Leaky Black improves, and they add people from the transfer portal. I do think this can be a solid team next year. Obviously, Roy Williams won't be there, but I don't think that expectation is unreasonable.
So last question, Sherrell, and I promise you it's the last one. Did you?
Nobody like Taylor's just been looking at me. He hasn't even said anything.
I mean, we're catching you up for like the hour you missed.
Bro, I didn't say hey to Brooke. Like, it's just, yeah.
Everybody's like, look at Sherrell. He's here.
He's heat checking right now.
So yeah, really. So didn't you have the field when I took Baylor and Gonzaga?
Well, you cheated because at first it was Gonzaga in the field. Then you changed it to Gonzaga and Baylor in the field in like January or something.
That
at first
kid
it was
right
just
there is
Gonzaga.
in the field.
I was Gonzaga in the field, and I lost, and I owe you. I owe you a blue cup. So
okay, all right.
Congratulations.
I'm gonna, y'all boys think that's been good. I'm gonna have a lot of blue cups that he's not when I take it off these little college guys.
I don't owe Tommy anything. Screw that.
Once Houston lost, I was like, well, I guess I owe Tommy or Gregory. Oh well, it happens.
That was that impressive?
Yeah, man. I haven't seen.
I didn't think is Davion Mitchell in the portal? Because I'll go get him personally.
He's from Liberty County. He's from Georgia too. Liberty County, Georgia.
Who was your champion, Brooke?
I didn't. I would have gone with Gonzaga from the get go, but as the tournament played on, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't think they can stay in front of those guards from Baylor. They were getting. I mean, the way they shoot it, and the way they put it on the deck. I mean, they were incredibly impressive throughout the course of the tournament, and I didn't think Gonzaga could stay in front of them, and they couldn't. Obviously, they were just monsters.
Ridiculous.
There. The way they shot it and the way they got to the rim with such ease on those switches, and it was impressive.
Sherrell, you look at UCLA. Is there a Johnny Juzang out there in the transfer portal this year?
I know. I mean, and the thing is, that was one of those that everybody just kind of like, oh, a top 30 kid leaving Kentucky, like whatever. And now he's at UCLA and he's just killing it. Like
he's getting buckets.
Yeah, I didn't. Sean Moran, props to him. He's been talking about him for like 5 years, that he's going to be really good, that he was all over. He's like, Carolina needs to recruit him. He's a great kid. He's going to play really well. And then he went to Kentucky and got buried. And I just kind of forgot about him until like the Pac-12 tournament. I hadn't even thought about his name. And then he had quite a, I guess, 9-game run there or 8-game run there. So
I saw ESPN put UCLA at number 2 in their way too early rankings.
Good luck with that. Yeah,
they're 11th seed.
Yeah.
So highest rated Baylor recruit, Sherrell. What, like 60?
Oh man, I think it might have been what's the Mark Vidal? I think it might have been Mark Vidal, because I remember him at MBPA camp like 5 years ago. The super kind of jacked like forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's not him, I don't know.
He was 89th.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know then.
It's crazy to me how experience and talent wins championship tournament games, and they showed it. I mean,
tell that to Texas. Tell that to Shaka Smart in Texas. How much did their experience and talent help them after I talked about him on this podcast?
That's
they lost
weird.
to Abilene Christian in the first round.
Yeah, you and I were together, Sherrell. We were like Texas Final Four,
Yeah.
and Luke was saying his crap about Pencil, Michigan State. And we were like, nope, Texas.
Matt
Matt
Coleman, senior
and then
guard.
what the
yeah,
heck,
the
man?
big-
50
yeah.
points?
But then, I mean,
50
Shaka
points?
wins more games at VCU than he does at Texas. How does that happen?
I thought,
Beats Carolina, though.
there's a few years ago that I thought today's press conference would have been with Shaka Smart. I thought maybe 4 or 5 years ago that it seemed like a fit. He's from the area, it seemed like it was going to fit, and just hasn't really done anything of consequence since.
Texas basketball, where aspiring dreams go to die. Boys, it's
Love
been
Chris
fun.
Beard.
It is,
And-
yeah, really.
Tommy, before you wrap it up, for everyone watching, tomorrow, 9 p.m.,
Oh,
same
yeah.
deal, football talk. So if you've been starved for football content over the last 5 days and whatnot, we're going to do a little roundtable football talk tomorrow leading up to the scrimmage on Saturday. So be here, same place, same time.
Yep. Jason Staples will join us, Buck Sanders, and I'm going to roll Greg Barnes out of bed and get him on this one again. He has been – he tried to bail out, but he said he would join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock right here on the Inside Carolina YouTube channel. I've been your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Taylor VIppolis. Michael Brooker's been with us the whole hour. Sherrell McMillan shows up, like rolls up in the limo.
No power.
Late. Sure, you had no power. I believe that.
Dark.
And you had a candle. And
Mhm.
Gregory Hall, of course, running it. We'll be back tomorrow. This has been the Inside Carolina podcast. Hubert Davis, now the head coach at North Carolina. It's going to be an interesting summer. We'll be right here to cover it. Thanks, everyone. We off the live.
Hey, did y'all see